Hey, this is Michael Flores, and we're going to do a little solitaire video with Zvi Moshewitz's ID19 deck. So in this video, literally going to party like it's 1999. Magic Online is asking us if we want to mulligan here. The answer is going to be no, I think. This hand is very, very good 7-card hand. And it's an even better 8-card hand. We're going to play City of Traders here, summon a Grim Monolith, tap the Grim Monolith for 3 mana, make a Voltaic Key, and then just play around to untap the Grim Monolith. So Voltaic Key is going to untap Grim Monolith, there's going to be a mana floating, untap itself, blah, blah, blah. This opening hand is so super good. Rootwater Depths is normally not a card that's very good, but in this hand it's absurd. It's like a free card because we don't have to take any damage to play Yawgmoth's Bargain. So we're just going to tap all these, play Mox. I hate to discard Crystal Vein, but it has to be done in this case. So tapping Rootwater Depths, tapping Mox Diamond for black and black. We have 7 in pool and we have 1 floating. A less conservative player might have used Voltaic Key to get some more colorless mana, but there's a strong possibility that we'll have to use Voltaic Key to untap a Mox Diamond in the mid-game. Mid-game? What am I even talking about? It's turn 2. We're going to win on turn 2. Just arranging my hand a little bit. So we currently have 10 life. Since we're playing a solitaire game, there are a few life thresholds we have to pay attention to. One of them is 4 life. You see I just moved Vampiric Tutor over. At 4 life, you can pay 2 life for a Vampiric Tutor and then pay 1 for Yawgmoth's Bargain and draw any card in your deck. So I might stop at 4. If you're just like completely balls to the wall, you can go to 1. So we just drew a turnabout, which is awesome. So because we drew that turnabout, I can just go all the way down to 1 life here. I'm thinking about 4. Now we'll go to 1. So we're rewarded with Grim Monolith, which is a playable card in this situation. Arranging that next to the turnabout. And we're rewarded with a Crystal Vein, not going to do anything. And finally, a Rescind, also not going to do anything. So we're going to play the pair of Mox Diamonds in our hand. Discard some rando lands that we're not going to need anymore. And then remember that 1 mana we had from earlier in this turn, I guess. Untap the Grim Monolith here. We can play another Grim Monolith. We've got some mana floating. Tap all this stuff. And then add a pair of blue mana from the 2 Mox Diamonds we just played. And then we're going to turnabout ourselves. So target us. We're going to say artifacts, and we're going to untap all of our artifacts. So that's going to give us the Voltaic Key, pair of Grim Monoliths, and 3, count them, 3 Mox Diamonds all active again. What would our opponent have done on the first turn? This is like absurd. This is a second turn for a standard deck. I mean, granted it was standard in 1999, but imagine what even a really aggressive first turn might have been. Like, unless the opponent just plays planes, leaving it up for an erase, what would they have done? So obviously, we've just casted Delusions of Mediocrity, which gives us a lot of Yawgmoth's Bargain fuel. Drawing cards. We've got a Show and Tell there, so normally you do want to do something like play Show and Tell to get Yawgmoth's Bargain into play. Like if you have like a Mox and a City of Traders, you can play Yawgmoth's Bargain on the first turn. And do basically what we're doing right now, except for on the first turn instead of the second turn. But once we've got all this machinery going, Show and Tell is pretty much just there to cast Delusions of Mediocrity for 1 less mana. You can see here we've bargained it down to 1 again. We have the Blaze. We have the Yawgmoth's Will. There's no conceivable way that we could fail to go off here. In an interactive game, you might be worried about playing around an erase or a counterspell. And when I say counterspell, I mean they would have had to go first, right? If you've gone first and they have the card counterspell, they're not even going to stop you, which is absurd. This deck is obviously, especially for a standard deck, something very, very special. I obviously have enough resources to win the game right here, so we have Yawgmoth's Will. I could just dump the Yawgmoth's Will in concert with some Dark Rituals, and then get back my turnabout from the graveyard, and then just blaze for lethal. But hey, it's not every day that we resurrect a deck that's 15 years old and talk about it and do some solitaire Magic the Gathering. So what I'm actually going to try to do is, from second turn resources, actually try to draw my entire deck and do multiple lethal plays all in one turn. So here we're in a spot where I've bargained down to 1 life. So at 1 life, I can't even use Vampiric Tutor anymore. And I don't have a turnabout. So what have we got? Scroll Rack. So Scroll Rack's going to let us manipulate a ton of cards here. I'm just gonna put every card to the right of that blaze on top of my library and switch them up. So we should be picking up on the order of 11 new cards. And among those 11 new cards are a Mox Diamond, a Voltaic Key, another Voltaic Key, a Grim Monolith. And shockingly, it looks like we're still shy of Turnabout. So what are we going to do here? So first I'm just going to arrange all the cards that I actually want to keep playing with. In order for us to do what I've set out to do, which is to draw my entire deck and do multiple lethal blazes, we're going to need to draw some additional cards. So I'm just going to play out my artifact mana that I've just drawn. So there's a Mox Diamond. It's soon to be joined by Grim Monolith and a couple of Voltaic Keys. I'm going to tap the Grim Monolith for 3. That's so I don't end up using black mana to cast my artifacts. Probably doesn't matter in this game, but it's still just better to use colorless mana instead of black mana if we can. Then I'm going to make a blue with a Mox Diamond, and then show and tell out a Delusions of Mediocrity. So why are we using show and tell? Doesn't it use an extra card? The answer is yes, but we have no shortage of cards. We have tons of cards, but you save a mana this way. So we have 11 life, but there's no point in using Yawgmoth's Bargain because we just put 11 cards on top of our library that weren't very good. So instead I'm going to actually cast Vampiric Tutor and then bargain for 1 to get the turnabout. So huzzah, we have the turnabout, and we can start tapping all of our artifacts because we're going to do that same trick of targeting ourselves with turnabout and then picking artifacts and then untapping all the artifacts. So generally speaking, Vampiric Tutor isn't that great in this deck after you already have Yawgmoth's Bargain in play. It's the kind of thing where you bargain down to 4 and only use Vampiric Tutor if you really, really are in trouble. For us, we really wanted to get that turnabout. But the upside here is because we did cast the Vampiric Tutor, we get to shuffle our library. So remember, a second ago we put 11 crappy cards on top of our deck, so now it's random cards again. Just want to draw back down to 4 just to see if I can get any more artifact mana. The reason for that, of course, is that we're about to cast this huge turnabout, and it's just best if we have all the artifacts on the battlefield that we can have before casting the turnabout. So once again, we're going to turnabout ourselves, naming artifacts, untap all these artifacts. And again, could easily have won this game several repetitive actions ago. But what I really wanted to do is to show you that on the second turn, we could draw our entire library and do all kinds of goofus stuff. Now we've only got 17 cards left in our library, so I'm going to cast double Delusions of Mediocrity using show and tell where applicable. This, of course, puts us well over 17 life, and so we can just draw the rest of our deck here. So there's a turnabout, there's a useful card. Vampiric Tutor is no longer useful. So now that we have way more life than deck, unlikely we'll ever have to cast Vampiric Tutor. So I'm just gonna draw. I don't really care what I'm drawing. This is just for style points now. With rare exception, this is just going to be the crappy lands that we put back on top of our library with Scroll Rack a few repetitive actions ago. So, Crystal Vein, City of Brass, etc., etc. And 3, 2, and 1, that's the last card in our library. So we have no cards in our library. 7 spare life. So rich. Let's see what we can do. Make some mana, make a Grim Monolith, make a key. So I'm just gonna do the long labor of tapping all of my artifacts again. I think you've heard this one before, so we're gonna add a whole bunch of mana to our mana pool. This time, however, we're gonna add a red mana, because Blaze costs red, and then do the same turnabout trick that we've done a couple of times previous this game. I know this deck looks super fancy, but I want you to know that I had to practice with it a whole bunch before I came up with this pretty sweet second turn Goldfish. It's a pretty complicated deck, so if you're not familiar with it, you might not have the right amount of life when you have to use your Vampiric Tutor, or you might not have enough blue when you need to cast your Turnabout. Speaking of Turnabout, we're going to untap all of our artifacts again. So we have 10 colorless already, a pair of blue, and of course a red floating. Just tapping our Grim Monoliths, we will be able to have sufficient mana to cast a Blaze for 20. As you can see, we have a couple of Moxes untapped still. We've got double blue in our pool, so really we're planning to point a 20-point Blaze. It's going to be at ourselves because this is a solitaire game. You see, I just jumped Yawgmoth's Will a second ago. If the opponent had an answer for that Blaze, we would have more than enough resources to cast the Yawgmoth's Will, then rebuy all the Dark Rituals and Turnabouts in our graveyard to cast the same Blaze a second time. So I'm just going to go ahead and click OK, and 20 damage. Turn 2. This is a really powerful standard deck, and as V was the first one to point out, it was all about Yawgmoth's Bargain.